Warning, this show may contain biased opinions regarding the Southeastern Conference, and in particular, the University of Florida. College football fans that don't meet these criteria are cautioned, for this program may show outrageous and extreme takes.
From the beginning of time, humans have always strived for greatness. We are taught to be the best, to never give up, and go after what we want. This is taught in every American school class. Do whatever it takes to be a winner, no matter who you hurt. You must win at all costs, even if it means taking out those closest to you. Burn everything down, regardless of the cost. But you know, not enough things get said about losers in society. Without losers, there would never be a winner. In a competition, there always needs to be someone who succeeds and someone who fails. The perfect yin and yang. Well, that's exactly what I'll be diving into this episode, as we cover the 1946 Florida Gators and what is probably considered one of their worst seasons in program history.
Oh my! We got 30 minutes for the rest of our lives! 30 minutes for the rest of our lives!
The 1940s were a difficult time for college football and the entire world in general. Though it was more severe, it was similar to the way times are right now. Because of World War II, many teams were broken up. With many of the current and potential college athletes joining the war effort, many teams opted out from playing in the early 40s. The Gators were one of those teams that opted out in 1943, and they greatly struggled during this time. Florida hadn't had a winning record since the 1934 season, and after the 1945 season, UF President John Tigert decided to not renew head coach Tom Lieb's contract and decided to go with a new option at head coach. In January, he decided to hire coach Raymond Bear Wolf. Wolf had just retired from the Navy, where he was an officer for the reserves. Before that, he was the head coach at North Carolina, where he had a lot of success, going 38, 17, and 3 in 6 seasons. Wolf had played football at TCU, where he played tackle. He even played professional baseball for the Cincinnati Reds for a season before getting injured. He would then be an assistant coach at TCU and would later coach for the Tar Heels at North Carolina. He joined the Navy after the 1941 season and ended up coaching some of the teams at the bases he was stationed at. After joining the Gators that winter, he soon realized that this was not going to be an easy task. Florida was going to be going through what was probably their 11th rebuilding year in a row, and the Gators were weak in almost every position. Wolf's biggest complaint that offseason was lack of bodies. He would spend the spring moving players into different positions and creatively trying to fill all the roster spots with quality players. The most successful SEC teams at the time had filled their rosters with highly recruited high school athletes, whereas the Gators had mainly used ex-veterans from the war to fill theirs. The Gators also happened to have a very tough schedule ahead of them, with almost every team they played being in a better position than they were. Wolf also complained about what was expected from him as a first-year coach from the fans. Football was quickly becoming more and more popular, and the state of Florida was already crazy about it. Alumni and boosters for the Gators were already growing impatient, wanting to be one of the best teams in the country. With neighboring teams like Georgia and Alabama finding a lot of success, fans could clearly see how far behind they were from being a great team. Ray Wolf asked fans to do something that would be absolutely preposterous today. He said, "If they won't expect too much next fall, it'll help a lot. I'm not trying to kid myself or anything else. We're facing quite a job, and I hope to produce a team which will improve as it gains experience. But we can't promise a winner this fall." I'm not gonna lie, I can't imagine an SEC coach coming into a team today and telling fans that he can't promise to win games, and the fans actually being okay with that. Some of the notable players going into this season included Billy Parker, Broughton Williams, Harold Griffin, Chuck Hussinger, Casper Vaccaro, and Doug Belden. Though there was a lot of hype from fans for football to start, they would soon regret that wish as soon as the Gators took the field. They lost their first game to Ole Miss 13-7. This game would have a lot of similarities to how the entire season went. Florida would hold up fairly well for most of the game, but because of the lack of depth and experience, they had trouble staying competitive throughout the entire game. Florida's first touchdown came from a pass from Billy Parker to Broughton Williams. This would continue for the rest of the season, as many teams had trouble stopping the Gators' aerial attack, something not a lot of teams were good at the time. There was an estimated 20,000 fans in attendance at Ole Miss that day, which was considered a large crowd for the times. The Gators would continue to play in front of large crowds for the rest of the season, despite their record, kind of showing you how popular football was becoming. Regardless of some spark from the offense, Florida still lost to Ole Miss, making their record 0-1. Ole Miss ended up going 2-7 for the rest of the season. They had just as tough of a schedule as Florida had. This was one of Florida's only chances to sneak a win in, and they already gave it up game 1. Their next 2 games would be more of the same thing. They would lose to Tulane 27-13 and Vanderbilt 20-0. Florida was actually up early in the Tulane game with some rushing touchdowns from Casper Vaquero and Doug Belden. They also passed the ball well again this game. But Tulane was able to handle the Gators for the rest of the game and came out with the victory. They also would only finish their season 3-7, only beating Florida and Auburn in the SEC. For the Vandy game, this is probably one of the only time periods that we will know for the rest of our lives where Vanderbilt was consistently good. With more than 20,000 fans in attendance, which I think is slightly more than Florida's average at the time, the Commodores handled UF with ease, with Scrappy Morris scoring a couple of touchdowns in the game. This is where Florida had one of their bigger blows of the season. Passer Billy Parker had been throwing the ball well all season to receiver Williams. During the Vanderbilt game, he suffered a knee injury, which would keep him out for the rest of the season. They were now down one of their strongest weapons offensively. Up next, they had in-state rival Miami. Many fans have been looking forward to this game all season, and it seemed like this one meant a little more to the Gator fans and players than some of the other games on their schedule. This would also be Florida's homecoming game, so there was expected to be a lot of fans in attendance. The game did not disappoint. It was probably Florida's best game all season. UF had a record crowd of 21,105 fans. Miami was on the board first with a touchdown pass from Hal Johnson to Andy Novak. Florida would respond with 2 of their own touchdowns, from a 5-yard rushing touchdown from Casper Vaquero and a 96-yard punt return for a touchdown from Harold Griffin, who decided to start tearing it up for the rest of the season. They would be up at halftime, 13-7. UM would enter the second half, with Bill Krasnai scoring a 1-yard rushing touchdown, and then icing the game with an 11-yard rushing touchdown. They would end up winning the game, crushing Florida's dream for an upset. Miami would go on to have a great season, going 8-2. Florida had played a great game, but was again unable to finish it in the second half. After an emotional loss, the Gators would go on to get whipped by both North Carolina and Georgia. UNC beat them 40-19, with their star, Charlie Choo-Choo Justice, almost single-handedly winning the game, with a 90-yard touchdown run, a 70-yard punt return, and another 77-yard punt return. Though they lost, Florida would continue to pass the ball well, this time with Doug Belden throwing the rock, connecting again with Broughton Williams throughout the game. UNC would go on to be 8-2, winning the Southern Conference and going to their program's first Sugar Bowl. Up next, Florida had to play a powerful Georgia team. Florida played Georgia well in the first half again, leading the Bulldogs 7-6 and surprising most of the fans. But Georgia would dominate the second half, finishing the game 33-14. Their All-American, Charlie Trippi, would end the game with 2 touchdowns. There were almost over 25,000 fans there in Jacksonville for this game, which would be the largest crowd Florida would see all season. Georgia ended up going 11-0 that season, winning the SEC championship, where they would meet the Tar Heels in the Sugar Bowl and beat them 20-10. The Gators' last 3 games would be no different than the previous 6, losing to Villanova, NC State, and Auburn. Broughton Williams would end up getting injured in the Villanova game and would not return for the rest of the season. He would end up being the nation's leading receiver. Gators punt returner Harold Griffin would also lead the nation in punt return average. Their offense consistently showed promise in their games, but as I've mentioned a few times, their lack of depth and experience made them unable to finish games. This would be Florida's second winless season in school history, with the last time being in 1916. Though they wouldn't go winless again until the 70s, after this season, they still had to rebuild, with Coach Ray Wolf being just under 500 in his next 3 seasons. The 1946 year was the middle of a 13-game losing streak for Florida, which wouldn't end until their next season. This time period would be named by players as the Golden Era. Many players from these teams would continue to meet up later in their lives, and would continue to support the university and the football team. The 40s and 50s were a rough time for Florida football, but it's nice to see just how far they've come since World War II. It just goes to show you that at one point, a school can consistently be one of the worst teams in their conference, and then throughout time, they can do a 180 and be one of the better teams in their conference. Thank you for watching this episode. Please make sure to like, subscribe, or comment. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter in the links below. I will see you next time on the College Football History Channel.